Okay, The Holy Man, Chapter 18, The Question. Four women pilgrims who had become friends in the line sat around their campfire talking. Liv was a woman in her early 60s from Scandinavia, a maternal and successful woman to whom the others were naturally drawn. When I send my grandchildren gifts, they do not write me thank you notes, she said. The others nodded. There was nothing new about that old problem. It makes me so sad. That's why I have come to see the holy man to ask him what to do. The others sat up with dropped jaws, quite shocked at this admission. But Liv, honey, that's the sort of question in our country we write to an advice column about. We don't spend all this time and money coming to see the holy man who, in any case, I can assure you, is into much deeper matters. They all began to laugh at Liv and her question. You might as well ask him how to get children to pick up their clothes. A man moved into their firelight from the shadows, a jolly person who was another favorite among them. I'm behind you all the way, Liv. This is a question that has baffled Western civilization. Another man said, I think I can tell you what the holy man will say. The answer is that you are bringing this suffering upon yourself, and in order to relieve yourself of it, you can do one of two things. You can stop sending them presents, or you can just be happy with the giving and not expect or hope for a thank you note. The idea being that if you don't hope, you won't be disappointed. Well, Liv admitted, sometimes I have stopped sending presents for a while, but I have more money than they do, and they need the clothes and the fun things they wouldn't have otherwise. I'm sure you're right about the hoping. I think I have taught myself not to expect the letters, but I still feel so hurt when I don't get them. Others crowded around the fire. I sacrificed and went without to send my son to college. It cost me $80,000. He never thanked me. Most kids take it for granted that you'll pay for their education, said one of the women, like it's part of their birthright. Maybe grandchildren think the same way, a woman suggested helpfully. They expect ongoing presents from their grandma. It's a given, a part of life. Do you talk to them on the phone? Liv was asked. Sometimes I call to ask them if they got the presents, and they thank me and say they really like them. But I want them to tell me without my calling to ask. I want them to write to me on their own. I don't see why you didn't spend this money going to see them instead of the holy man. That way, they could get to know you. Except for this year, I have gone every summer to spend a month with them, Liv said. I have my own business, so I'm able to take the time. I stay at a nearby inn because my daughter-in-law is not so fond of me, and I don't feel comfortable in her house. The other women muttered darkly at this. My son is not a perfect husband to her, and she blames me. She says I spoiled him, and now I am spoiling the grandchildren. More dark muttering. I always have a good visit with the children, and when I go away, I am sure that they will write me thank you notes when I next send them presents, but they never do. My daughter lives 2,000 miles from me, said a woman. I used to send her money for her college education. She never wrote to me unless I was a little late with the money. After a couple of years, I began to be suspicious. I investigated and found out she wasn't going to college. She was living with a man and supporting him. They all gasped. What a betrayal! My son died, said another. It was a freak accident. He was running and he jumped over a fence and misjudged. He caught his foot and landed flat, hitting his head on a rock. He was in a coma for a long time and then he died, my darling boy. She wiped tears away, and others did too. By now, a lot of people had joined their circle around the fire, and two others offered stories of losing their children, one to suicide, another to drugs, and so forth. Liv's problem grew more and more insignificant in the light of these terrible tragedies, but not to her. During the ensuing days, she became an object of mirth to many in the line, the woman who had come to ask the holy man how to get her grandchildren to write thank you notes to her. One day, the jolly man asked her, Do you think that if they wrote to you, it would prove that they love you? She thought about it. Yes, I guess that's it. Yes, I guess that's it. It would prove I was in their minds, and I had some reality in their life. I feel so alone. My husband is dead. In not so many years I will follow him. I want them to remember me, but how can they if they do not even remember me when I am alive? The man frowned and shook his head. It was a sorry situation, all right. He didn't have an answer, but he was one who always looked on the bright side, so he said, Maybe they will miss you this summer. Be so disappointed you didn't come visit that everything will change. She lit up. That's what I was hoping, but I didn't dare admit it to myself. Maybe right now they are wishing with all their hearts that I was with them and vowing to do differently concerning me, vowing to show their appreciation. Let's hope so, he said warmly, not realizing he was disregarding the other man's advice about the perils of hoping or expecting. In her heart, though, Liv feared they didn't care, or worse, didn't notice that their grandmother hadn't come to see them this summer. 2 days later, she was able to lay out her trouble to the holy man, detaining him at the back door after he told her who he was, grasping his sleeve and not letting go until she had emptied her heart. Egotism, he said sternly, so that she dropped his sleeve as if burnt and fell back against the door. You are suffering from an advanced case of egotism, he admonished, going overboard as he was sometimes wont to do. I can tell you right now that if they each wrote you 10 pages a week, you would not be satisfied, would still feel wronged and unappreciated, and probably want 20 pages. How can those children love you until you are able to love them, selflessly, unconditionally? Goodbye. As the door closed behind her, and she started down the mountain path, the long, lonely path, so conducive to reflection, she exclaimed aloud, The very idea! Who does he think he is? Well, I never! He's obviously never had ungrateful children to deal with, living his rarefied life as he does. What does he know about giving, and getting no return? Then she thought how he gave of himself every day of his life, and there was no donation box, no plate being passed, no beautifully printed, carefully worded requests for money in the mail. He had not written any books for them to buy, nor were there any relics, holy man pictures, splinters of hermitage, chips of surrounding boulders, small bottles of holy man spring water. Flushing, she remembered him saying that if they wrote 10 pages, she would expect 20, and she began to admit to herself that she had sometimes received certain scrawls and scribbles from her grandchildren over the years, but had discounted them, telling herself that their mother or father had made them write to her. Was that what he meant by never being satisfied? But my goodness, isn't it natural for a mother or grandma to want to be loved and appreciated? I really do not in the least see what's so egotistical about that. She remembered all the many times, hundreds of times over the years, she had said to her grandchildren, Do you love your grandma? But she could not remember saying, I love you, to them. Yes, she began to see and began to feel free from herself, to feel her heart lift. She sat down on a rock to look at the view and to look at the new life that was unfolding within her. She heard footsteps and, looking back, saw that her 3 women friends, having waited for each other, were hurrying down the path after her. We are dying to know what the holy man told you, they said. Shame smote her. She bowed her head. It was hard for her to speak. It was like admitting she had a horrible disease. She tried. What? They urged. What? Her chin knocked against her collarbone. He said I was a terrible egotist. They fell silent, as shocked by his answer as they had originally been by her question. But they were reluctant to sympathize. The holy man must know the truth of the matter. They began to feel somehow impressed, as if she'd been favored. He must have really cared to tell her such a thing, to not pull his punches. Nevertheless, you are a holy person, said the youngest woman, surprising Liv, who looked up to see who she was talking about. Yes, you. Now that he has told you that you are an egotist, you don't need to be one anymore. You can be holy, as we all are. If we treat everyone as a holy person, we will be happy. He told us so. Is that so? Said Liv to the ebullient youngster. How long will it take? It's instant. I feel that I am a holy person right now, and that you are too, and that is that. It's that simple. He said it was so, and it is so. Let's not make a big deal out of it. She laughed. She had embraced with ardor the idea of treating everyone as a holy person and couldn't wait to get going, which was why she got going on Liv. And it worked. Already she felt happier, and Liv looked happier too. They hugged each other and went down the hill together. Liv felt light-hearted going down the path with her friends. It's going to be fun, she thought, not being egotistical. She hadn't felt like this since she was a child. She felt a new life beginning, one that was full of possibilities. Yes, she would be forgiving to her grandchildren, to everyone, and be a nobler person all around, a person people would look up to as they did to the holy man, look up to and learn from. Unfortunately, Liv began to feel important in her new role as a holy person. She held her head high, trying out a benign smile, wishing she had a mirror. Wait for me! They turned and saw the jolly person running after them. What did he say to you? What is the answer to the celebrated thank you note question? Liv again had difficulty speaking the dread word, but her 3 friends assisted her, shouting, Egotism. I see, said the man. Yes, well, of course, children are bound to be egotistical. It is the nature of being a child. They are busy with their friends and their games and their stories and their worries. Kids have worries too. It's not easy being a kid, or an adult either. I don't know which is the hardest. But you need a good, healthy ego in this world to look out for yourself, I'll tell you that. Isn't it the truth? Liv said, linking her arm in his. You're a man of real understanding. But you're confused, I think, the young woman timidly suggested. You see, egotism is the sickness of an unhealthy ego. The holy man was referring to Liv's ego, not the grandchildren's. Surely not, said the jolly man, patting Liv's arm that had encircled his and smiling sweetly at her. Tell me what he said. Liv found that she did not want to repeat the holy man's words. He had hurt her feelings, and now this nice man was repairing them. He was on her side. Liv and he walked ahead on the trail, enjoying their rapport.